Welcome to Cool Explorations.
Remember, guys, if you like these videos, just hit that little like button and subscribe to there so you don't miss any of the future videos.
Canada has two big agencies in the country to protect our country of Canada, CSIS and the RCMP, or Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, both with separate roles. CSIS is our spy agency, and these two groups were one group until 1984 when they were split and given their two different roles. CSIS is responsible for national security, so they look at documents and listen to conversations to determine what may or may not be a threat to our nation's security. They operate in missions similar to the CIA, only to a lesser degree, whereas the RCMP is not covert in any way. They are responsible for matters within our own borders, including ethical investigations. They monitor our highways, rural areas, and protect people in a security/bodyguard capacity. So you'll see them at the Grey Cup as kind of their symbolic thing as they bring out the cup. Both of these organizations have had their issues over the years, and with saying that, I don't want to take away any importance of what they do. Canada needs both the CSIS and RCMP, and we need what they do. They both keep us safe and lower the risks to Canadians. One misstep of CSIS was in 2013 when they were spying on a naval officer for many months, and this officer was handing over our secrets to the Russians, and had been for quite a while, yet nothing was said from CSIS to the RCMP, who should have been brought into the loop right away. The FBI ended up being the ones that let the RCMP know about the situation. And this just shows a disconnect and lack of communication between the different levels of government organizations. And that is a problem that needs to be addressed, as having that issue could definitely put all of us Canadians at risk. Little details can be missed, and those little details could lead to a big miss, which could cost hundreds of lives. 9/11 would be a great example of the cost of missing things and not sharing information between security organizations. Speaking of 9/11, CSIS and the RCMP made a controversial decision right after this. In their defense, though, it was a confusing and emotion-filled time in our recent history, so mistakes were made by people at all levels of government and government entities. Canada had 3 Canadians that were arrested in Syria, and they did nothing to stop it or step in, which actually makes sense. How the RCMP and CSIS did get involved, however, is to provide a list of questions that they wanted to be asked and tortured out of these Canadians. Although Canada has not actually done the torturing themselves, they still may as well have been the ones doing it, as they knew about it, and through inaction they condoned the torture, and by giving a list of questions, they were definitely condoning it. Canada is supposed to have a non-torture policy, and is also supportive of organizations who fight the use of torture. We fight for human rights, yet allow Syria, a country with awful human rights records, to go through with torture. Hypocrisy. We supported it, and then we used the torture to get what information we wanted. A very shameful act, and it needs to be learned from. Of course, both organizations will have and will continue to make many more blunders and mistakes in the future. So this is not to take away from either group. Again, we find that they are a very important and necessary couple of groups for our country, especially with the rise of terrorism. As a result, I won't focus on too many of their errors, although I would like to see them stand up to our government and investigate Trudeau and the Liberals for fraud and ethical violations that we have seen. Trudeau seems to prevent them from doing this, and they just let him do it, when the RCMP really needs to just man up and take action, because us as Canadians, we deserve answers. One of the things that they should be looking into, aside from the list that I came up with in a previous article, I didn't tackle this one issue here that kind of does irk me a little. Most people would be in jail for the kinds of violations that and scandals that Trudeau has committed. while he's been in power. We do need them to investigate Trudeau and the Liberals for fraud and ethical violations that we have seen, as there's been many. The one that I'm talking about right now that's bugging me is the personal swing set that he purchased for $7,500 for his kids. He claims that he is standing up for our middle class people in Canada here, but how many middle class people can afford to spend $7,500 on a swing set? And who needs a $7,500 swing set for their children? This was our taxpayer dollars being used to pay for a swing set that only a very slim percentage of Canadians could actually purchase themselves. Who really needed it that expensive? Well, nobody. My children play with a swing set that we bought for a small fraction of this price, and they're perfectly happy with it. And most kids are. Why does Trudeau feel that his children are better than and more entitled than most Canadian children to spend $7,500 on a personal swing set using my taxpayer dollars? I would have preferred he use his own money to buy this, not taxpayer dollars. I would have also liked to see this money, if he's going to spend it on swing sets, purchase 50 swing sets for families in Canada, families who could not otherwise afford these swings, and whose children do not have that entitled life. It is self-centered and inconsiderate to use money taken from taxpayers who can't afford the product themselves to purchase a swing set for your children, especially true with the fact that Trudeau is running a deficit with no end in sight to that deficit. This was a theft of taxpayer dollars, and not his only one, just one that stands out for me. I already did a previous article, as I mentioned, on the Trudeau ethical dilemmas, and you can find that article link in my blog. You'll find that in the blog post there, and just click on the link. You'll take you to either another video, or you can look up the blog post as well. And all of these things should be investigated by the RCMP, not ignored. It doesn't matter who you are; it should be investigated here. We need to have higher standards set for our Prime Minister, and he needs to learn to follow those standards. In June, we also saw the word genocide come out of Justin Trudeau's mouth. It was a hasty and unthoughtful use of the term. This is in reference to the disappearance and murder of many Indigenous women over the years, decades really. Trudeau says that his government and past governments allowed, ignored, and did nothing to prevent the deaths of these thousands of Indigenous women in our country over the years. His claims and statement has led to him and his government coming under investigation by Organization of American States. And they have said that they expect the full cooperation of the Canadian government. Other politicians and Canadians are upset by these statements from Trudeau, who backtracked and apologized after he realized the implications of what he claimed. It reflected poorly on all of Canada, as it wasn't all of Canadians who were involved in this. It was just maybe a handful of people who were making these women go missing and disappear and harming them. So I wouldn't really use the word genocide. That's not something that I think is applicable to this. It was the wrong word. It brought about the wrong implications, made all of us look poor here in Canada. It's just another error made from Trudeau, who really needs to put consideration into his words and thought into his actions before he does them, because that's his problem, is he doesn't think. Sometimes I wonder if he's even capable of it. And another ethical dilemma from him as well, as we've seen so many ethics violations by this Prime Minister who still somehow manages to get elected again. And it's another investigation that has gone into Trudeau and his Liberal government. We need organizations that are going to be held to a higher standard. They need to be responsible and follow their own policies. They need to protect Canadians, keep us safe, and to keep our government following ethical laws. They need to investigate these things, whether it's Prime Minister or another politician who did it. It needs to be investigated and taken seriously, and the proper actions need to be taken, not just, oh, you're Prime Minister, we can get away with this. We need a government that is considerate, clear thinking and avoids ethical dilemmas, which is not something we have seen out of the Liberals. So they should not have got re-elected. I don't know what people were thinking in re-electing this man. More thought needs to be used by our Prime Minister to avoid these unethical situations. Do some research or ask advisors before he speaks or acts. He really needs to focus on getting this country together again, help Canada be great again, unify the West. If he doesn't want separation, then he darn well better get his act together.
Remember to like and subscribe.